So, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this. Where are we today? The 5th of December, Governance Risk and Audit Committee. First of all, just to make it clear for anybody watching, that we're not quora. We're a few members missing. Hopefully, they are well, and we will continue because there's no substantive decisions being made, and that fits within the Constitution. So this is all just to note. The reports that we have in front of us today. So, and also I'd like to welcome Teresa, our new head of internal audit, here to us for the first time. I'm sorry we haven't got everybody here for you to meet, but I'm sure that'll happen in time, but welcome. Thank you. Okay, so straight on, let's crack on then. In terms of safety, you're all, you know, our members, officers, you know about fire alarms and everything, the phone's on silent, so let's crack on. So to receive apologies for absence. Emma?
We've received apologies from councillors Penfold and Spagnola.
Yeah, any substitutes?
No substitutes.
Thank you. Any public questions? No, none received, thank you. Items of urgent business? None? No, thank you. Declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest on the items out in front of us? No, thank you. So to approve them and record, to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting for the Governance Risk and Audit Committee held on the 12th of September. Do I need to go through page by page, or can I say that have you all read them? Do you have any comments to raise? Please go ahead. Thanks,
thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 7, we discussed having a timeline for the outstanding audit reports for 2020 or 21, 22 and 22, 23, I think, if memory serves.
Page 7 of the minutes, is it?
Yeah.
Let's see if I can find it.
Well, it's literally the first point on the minutes. So I just wondered where we were with that.
Minutes. There you go. It says. Yeah, timeline to sign off outstanding annual accounts. Yeah, and ask if this has been done. Which you've received. Did you receive the chart? There was a chart we sent out. Is that right, Mr. Stapling? To do with the external audit timelines.
I know that I can remember saying that I would send it out. I can't actually remember whether I did or not. I think I have outlined it previously in terms of at a meeting. I can send something out again, which will we, in terms of the position, it is at the moment that we're all awaiting the government's decision on whether they want maximum assurance, which would require the external auditors to come in to each authority and catch up on the accounts, but there would be points which I think for 21, 22 it would be by March next year, 31st of March, and then for 22, 23 I think it would be September next year. Then for 23, 24 I can't recall whether it was December or whether it was the following March, but any work that wasn't completed by those dates would stop and the audit opinion would be given on the basis of what had been audited at that point. So it would probably lead to not necessarily qualified audits, but that it wouldn't be a full audit opinion of assurance. That's if the government decide to take that path. The other alternative, which the external auditors feel probably from the letter that they'd had, that was the preferred option, was to do a reset as at 23, 24, I think. And that would mean that they wouldn't be doing any audit on 21, 22 or 22, 23, but they'd start again afresh at 23, 24. The councils, and along with all the councils in the country, would have to still produce the accounts for their own purposes, and also to provide a base, a starting point, opening balances for 23, 24. The auditors are still required no matter what happens, to do an audit on value for money. So they would definitely be coming in to do those for the all years, and also the pensions accounts. But that would be county council level rather than at our level. It's the pension funds themselves that they would still be required to audit. And it seems to have gone quite quiet in terms of there's been no further update. And I've not read anything in the, the publications and literature that we have coming out, the journals, etc., in terms of what the position is on that. So time is moving on. We are ourselves working on 21-22. We've done most of the work and are producing the actual statement now. 22-23, we have got considerably more work to do on that. And we haven't actually got to the end of 23-24 yet. So I think ourselves, we will probably be caught up in terms of producing statement of accounts by the end of March 24, so that we can then start to close down on 23-24. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the decisions about it need to be made elsewhere by government and the external auditors. Yeah, so we're just on the end of the line saying that roughly every 6 months they're going to do a year's worth. But in reality, because I went on to a regional call with this as well, and in reality, we're not going to get the assurance from it. So they're going to say, well, we've checked it, but we can't guarantee it. So really, do they have any value? Is a question that we have to ask. Therefore, I think the reset that people favour is probably, at least we say, look, we can't change that now. Apart from the value for money, and that is probably a good place to land. But happy to have a further conversation as we go through. Okay. All right. Thanks. Yeah, thank you. No, thank you. Anything else on the minutes? Okay. Okay, thank you. So we've had a further apologies from Councillor Vickers as well. Lost my track now. So in terms of accurate record, we're happy that they're an accurate record. Okay, yeah, thank you. We've only got the two proposed and seconded. Will be the same every time. Thank you. And I suppose I could do one, couldn't I? So just any items from the minutes anybody wants to bring up at all? No, I've got a few things. So let's do, I'm going to start try and get these right. Page 13. Now, which agenda is that going to be from? So page 13, we had to do with the internal, the environmental health audit, a written response that we'd not received. It says we should get a written response, but we've not had that yet. I've not seen that. Have you got anything further you can add to that? I know it's in the minutes and before your time, but if you could just update us, because
Yeah, no, in my
Thank you.
report of the outstanding recs, I've put in all the responses that were
Okay.
received at the time. I
Thank
can
you.
obviously, for the next one, we can keep chasing up and try and make sure that people give us a response.
Yeah, thank you. Because yeah, as I say, I raise it because it's in here
Yeah.
that we were going to get one and we've not received it. Also, page 15. This will be for our monitoring officer. It was if we had a further update on the independent member, what our plan is for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, members decided to go for one independent person to sit on the GRAC committee. I was intending to commence the recruitment process in the new year and after we have our new scrutiny officer with us.
Okay, thank you. Everybody happy with that as a way forward with that? No, thank you. And then also, yeah, also on page 17, we gave a recommendation, I think, to request that CRT give consideration to the inclusion of an AI risk on the corporate risk register. I wondered if that progressed any further. I don't know if they able to answer that just thing. I don't know because we don't have Steve here, or I don't know who might be able to answer that question today.
Yeah, I don't know what the position of that is, but certainly in one sense, AI is something that kind of falls within information governance. So I will chase that up for next time.
All right, thank you. That's great. Okay, that's all I had there, so I can sign those for you. I'll do that afterwards. Thank you. Right, minutes. So external auditors annual report, number 7. Did you want to deliver a verbal on top of the written there for us, Teresa? Do you want to add to it? Did you want to take the report as read? External, sorry, have I picked up? My apologies. Yeah, yeah, 7. So I've got nothing from that. Did anybody else have any? Are we just to note that? It's because I've got the wrong bits. To review and note the external auditors report for 2021. Did anybody ask a question?
We're sort of picking up the conversation, I suppose, we're having, because we
Yeah.
we look in there, it looks like there are some quite sizable revaluations, etc., right the way through.
Yeah.
So 2 questions, I suppose, for Tina is, do they have any material impact, or are they just effectively that they're just numbers on a page as opposed to having real impact on what the council needs to do in terms of its reserves? And the second point really is picking up what we were just talking about, because I noticed there was a reference to the February 2020 budget meeting when I was a fresh-faced young councillor in those days, the first one I went to, and obviously the times, that's nearly 4 years ago now. So it comes at the point now, what value are we getting? Are these all the figures we're doing it for nearly 3 years ago now being pulled forward into the current accounts, and what's happening to all the, what's happening in the intervening years? And I think it comes back to the point that John, you were making at that, because it makes some, given that we're so far behind now, some sort of resetting probably may well make some sense anyway. So.
With regard to all the recommendations in the auditor's annual report, I agree with them all, and we shall implement them all, with the exception of the authorisation of journals, which I don't agree with as being a necessary thing to do. The valuations, they are to some extent, until they're realised, if the asset is sold, as you say, numbers on a piece of paper, the adjustment goes through to a non-usable reserve, either the revaluation reserve or the capital adjustment account. And so they don't have any effect on our sort of general fund bottom line at all, or our capacity to spend anything, or reduce that power at all in any way, shape or form. We have thoroughly reviewed the fixed asset register. That has been done as part of the 21-22 exercise. It was because it wasn't really being kept properly, I think, previously, and we'd got some sort of several lines for one asset in the fixed asset register, but now that's been all amalgamated, so we've got proper valuations. So we accept that that was not being done properly before, but we have corrected that. So we shouldn't see those differences coming through, I don't think, in future years on the valuations and the adjustments on the fixed assets. With regard to the accounts themselves and catching up, as you say, this is referring to information that is now effectively sort of 4 years out of date. But what we will do, and what we need to do, is to actually close our accounts as if they were being audited, with the maximum assurance that we can give ourselves, so that we do have the correct balances, the balances that we're satisfied with as being true and fair, and giving a fair view of the council's financial position going forward, so that for 23-24 we do have those opening balances that we feel are true and fair, and that we can justify, because they will be audited. So they may look back a bit at some of the other accounts as they do this reset. But we are going through the process. You know, we do need to go through the process of actually closing the accounts properly, and we should do that. It's just that they won't be audited, so that we won't get that external assurance, as the chairman referred to. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if I mentioned it last time, but we need to be that assurance. This committee needs to give that best assurance that we can. We can only look after ourselves in this situation, I think. So when it comes to looking at the numbers, we need to do that. In terms of that particular report, the one thing that they're going to carry forward is value for money, and the value for money report is in there, and that reads okay. I think that didn't raise any particular issues for me. And also, additionally, I am going to talk to the pensions people at county so that I can understand how that fits within what's described here, to make sure if we need training, I need to understand it and say, is that something I can do? Do we need to get training? Which obviously Tina's office to help us with that. But I felt I needed to get a handle on that so that we understand how the pensions bit fits in and affects those bottom lines or doesn't. And then once I've had that, which I think it's the end of this week, then we can decide if we need training as a committee for that, to understand how that fits in, so that we can continue to provide our own assurances in those areas. Okay. Does that, anything else?
Yeah, any training we can get, I think, because I think it's not something we've had a lot of in this committee, I don't think, at the time. So
Yeah.
I think we do and some nooks and crannies. I think that'd be helpful.
So I'm having that first initial conversation this week, so I can understand it and get a grasp on it and see how big an issue it is or not. So yeah, please.
Yeah, with regards to training, it's the county that are delivering the training, and I've been on sort of the office training, and it is very useful and explains how the pension fund works and how the figures feed through into our accounts. And they have offered to do it after you've had your training to a wider audience. They're more than happy to do that. And we can also arrange treasury management training, our treasury management advisors. That's part of the contract that we have with them. They can come in and deliver treasury management training as well. So we can arrange that in due course. If there are any other areas of training that any member can think of or would like, then we're more than happy to deliver. You know, if we can find a suitable person to deliver it.
Yeah, no, thank you. And the other thing as well, which I would like us to follow up when we can, is the question of the doing the workshops to see about ways of presenting finance to, I don't want to say ordinary members, but to all members of all abilities, to make it easier understandable. Yeah, so in pictorial form rather than lots of numbers, because numbers are fine if you've done some training and they mean something to you, but for many they don't. And we need to get that assurance from as many people as possible. So yeah, thank you. Anything else on that particular report? We're good. No, so we note that as required. Thank you. So now we're on to internal audit. Apologies for that. Thank you, Teresa. So
Thanks, in Chair. So this is our progress report from the 1st of September to the 30th of November. There's been no changes to the 23-24 internal audit plan in this period. So far, we've done 41% of the internal audit plan. And Appendix 1 gives you a bit more detail about where we are with each of the audits. 2 reports have been finalised in the period. The land charges, which is a limited assurance with 2 urgent recommendations, and procurement and contract management, which had a reasonable assurance and 3 important recommendations. And you've got the executive summaries at Appendix 2. In terms of outstanding recommendations, there's 29 which are outstanding. 5 are urgent, 8 are important, and 16 needs attention. The appendices 4 to 8 gives you the details of the urgent and important ones for you to have a look at.
yeah.
And there's a further 21 recommendations which are not yet due, which are just being monitored. And we should have some of those implemented, or they'll be outstanding in the next report.
Okay.
Happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you. I'll just go with one first, and then I'll see if anybody else has got any questions. So it's around. I'm going to start with you know, that 41% where we are in the year. We're considerably down the way of the year. Was it a summary of 72 out of 176 days? Is this something that we should be concerned, or is it historical? Because I'm new chairman, so yeah, I'd like to understand where we sit with that and where we're going to resolve that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I would expect us to be further on in the plan. You know, we're almost now at the end of Q3. So we'd want to be nearer the 75% mark. The contractor is behind. It's not all their fault as such. They're obviously the information that they need for audits and agreeing start dates and moving audits forward is obviously talking with the client, the council officers, trying to arrange that. The contractor has had some staffing issues, but they are now fully staffed. They've had some people off sick for longer than perhaps they thought, but they are fully staffed, and they tell me they can complete the plan by the end of March. So we would get the Q4 draft reports by almost the end of April. I hope that is the case. Obviously, I'll be monitoring them and making sure they can do that. And in terms of next year, what we're trying to do is get some sort of protocol in place, which talks about responsibilities on everyone's side with some timescales to make sure that everyone knows that when they get a request for information, they only have so many days to reply to it. And then there'll be some escalations. And I'm hoping that will help move all the plans and that forward so that we can be in a better position, you know, as we go through each quarter and the plans do get completed. But as far as I know, the contractor's saying they will all be done. So we'll monitor that and see what happens.
As you say, we just have to monitor that. It's, you know, fingers crossed, because that's a fair bit of catch up to do, and of course it obviously has consequences for yourself and for us internally as well. So it will be nice, you know. We only have quarterly meetings. It's not like it's a surprise. We need to getting these things done timely, so we get an even work program, and I'm sure you're aware of that. But thank you. Any further questions from anyone else? Did you know? No, Jill? So
one or two, if I may.
yeah.
If I go to Appendix 2, and we're looking at the findings for the land charges searches. So the question is, why is that limited assurance as opposed to no? Because it doesn't seem to we have very much in there at all. And also, do we have a materiality of that? Sort of how many charges? What monetary figure would that land charges equate to since April of this year? Do we know that? If it's £10, it's not a big issue. If it's £100,000, then it's obviously more of an issue.
No, of course. No. Of course, no, we understand that. No, thank you. I don't know. On the microphone. Sorry, you didn't have your. Sorry, that's fine. Okay, I think that we probably got it through here, but okay, thank you. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that? No. Okay. So would you like more information?
Well, I think it'd be useful for us to understand the materiality of that. So if we don't get many fees in from land charges, well, it's best an irritant.
Yeah.
If it's something, if it's a sizable sum of money in terms of tens of thousands of pounds, and it's something a little bit more, I think we probably ought to give a little bit more focus to. But
I can just check the budget whilst talking and see what we've actually got in, and then just come back in a minute or two for you.
Yeah, I don't know when land charges. I guess every time there's a movement in a house or whatever, which can be quite significant, I suppose. I don't know. I don't know when it's charged for it. Thank you. All right.
Can I have some questions on Appendix 6, or we?
Yeah, no, go on. I've got some more to go. Yeah.
Do you want to?
No, it's fine. You got the chair.
I just want to look at some of them. I compared this with the last report, and some of the revised due dates have gone back. And so if I just Obviously, there's a major one on Appendix 7, which we'll probably come to in a second. But if you look at some of those, for example, NN 2213 waste management, that's gone back 6 months from the last report. What sort of confidence would we have even then? Because if I look at the text in there, that doesn't instill me a lot of confidence that will even be sorted there. And again, it's the materiality issue. Is that a big deal or not? That it has gone back.
Okay. I mean, I had that similar question around that as well. Those two, the corporate business continuity plan that's gone back and which we haven't received, and the waste management plan. Do we have any further updates? Because they were supposed to be December. I don't know if anybody's got any indication we might get them. So, because that's what's in the report. Are you able to answer that at all? No.
I think just
Yes.
looking at them from what I remember from writing the response, and I think the first one is the trouble is it involves other councils as well, from what
Yeah.
I understood. So
Yeah.
we're waiting on other
waste
people as well.
management, yeah.
If it was just us, I think they might have done. That's why that's got extended.
Yeah.
And the second one there, waste management, is to do with staff shortages, which I suppose is a difficult one.
Yeah, staff is an interesting one. Yeah. So the information you're still after there, Christopher, is how significant is it? The materiality of
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Are we
Cool.
able to get some sort of
And
answer for that as well?
if I may, I'd roll that through to you. Because we look at the other ones, we've
Right.
got key controls and insurance. Again, and one of those is, and then I think another one we've got one NN 202 key controls insurance. I mean, that's September this year. And it's just saying we're going to accept that risk, which may be fine. But I just wondered,
Yeah.
is that fine? I suppose is the question.
So yeah, so it's to say we get plus 40% of the income, we might only be getting 39, and it's not actually a lot. That's effectively what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. So is that something that we can quantify perhaps later? Not necessarily now. I don't know if you've got it in front of you. Thank you.
I thought the key controls and audit, the key controls audit, I had gone back on that one, but I will have to have a look at that and come back to you on it. Yeah.
Thank you.
I could just come back to you on the land charges as well, if you would like. The income that we were budgeting for well, the 23-24 base, the income, the fees, the searches, we were budgeting for 175,000. But the actual service is being transferred over to HMRC, Her Majesty's Land Registry, sorry, in 24-25 anyway. So there will be some loss of income there. It will be a gradual transfer, and we'll get some transitional funding to cover our loss of income from Her Majesty's Land Registry. So it's relatively quite high level of income, I think, for the size of the service.
Okay.
But I'm not sure that going forwards it will be that critical, because I said the vast majority of what is happening will be transferred over to a government department.
Will they be doing the work as well? Okay. I was worried that they were going to be taking the money and we were still going to be left doing the work. So effectively it's being phased out. So and none of that income will come to us as it does at the moment then?
No, it
With your
won't. I think
understanding.
Helen may wish to comment. You've just sent me something. I haven't had a chance to open it. Oh,
Okay.
right then. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So where do we go with that? I mean, that's if it's already this long and it's going to go. Yeah, I mean, is it really worth effort? I'm wondering what effort worth us to put it into that, considering the workloads.
Can I interject?
Yeah.
I don't think the whole service goes, just an element of the work.
Okay,
So the staff will still be there doing some of the work, and that will feed into the national position as well. So it's not that it's completely disappearing,
okay.
just an element of the work.
So we need to understand then how we're going to monitor it in the future then. If we're currently looking at it and we're saying that we're not looking at it properly, might as well decide how we're going to monitor it going forward. So is that appropriate change for that part? So if we could start to introduce that, is that, yeah, okay, yeah, so so do we do it as a recommendation? And we recommend that they review how the land charges is monitored and consider the appropriate action for the way it's going to be done in the future. So do we need proposal and second though? Or yes, I'll propose. Anyone from two? Okay, thank you. Was there anything else anybody wanted to raise in that report?
Well, the one, actually the key one, I think, I'd like to raise is Appendix 7, because that, in terms of materiality, it's something reading through the four items on the page there, which say we've got an urgent issue there, which seems to be around reconciliations. We haven't got any updates, so I just wondered if we could have an update, and when we have a due date, or we've got a due date of, which is now in the past. So the first question is, what is happening there, please?
Okay, one page. Have you got page number? Okay. Yeah, I got one here as well. So but no, thank you. Yeah, just to make sure that yeah, the reconciliations, yeah, no updated yet. So they're outstanding with no updated response. And yeah, that's down for so.
Yes, this was raised with me. It is partly due to the new financial system and partly due to staff issues. But when I asked about the bank account reconciliations, they are being reconciled, but we are having some issues with the system. But our reconciliations are giving us the assurance that we need in terms of making sure that all our entries are in there. There's part of the bank rec, it's the unpresented checks. We cannot yet load into the new system. So we know what that value is. So as long as that value stays the same and the bank reconciliation process that we're carrying out is done, which is being done regularly, then we're confident that there shouldn't be an issue with our bank reconciliations. Other reconciliations are being brought up to date, and we've recently brought in, he's only just started this week, another member of staff into the accounts receivable and accounts payable team, and he'll be looking at some of those reconciliations. And also we've got an accountancy assistant starting soon, so all the reconciliations that aren't up to date will be brought up to date with the additional staff that we've got in place.
Okay. Do we have a revised due date when we expect everything, all those risks to be resolved, please?
Because they were for October currently, so.
I think, I mean, so the top one, the bank account one, it's not that that one is really still outstanding, it's just it hasn't been updated. I mean, obviously it's not going to be the end of December, so I suppose it would be probably end of February, I would say, if at the latest, I would have thought, because we'll need to get everything sorted anyway for the closure of accounts for 22, I mean for 23, 24. And just on that page, it's got the key controls and assurance. Management should ensure that all investment made are appropriately authorised. They are we do have segregation of duty there already. So if an investment is made, another officer within the team has to authorise the investment. So I'm not quite sure what that one is anyway. But I'm happy that there is segregation of duties and that does protect the authority from any sort of fraudulent attempt to make any investments inappropriately.
Okay.
Mm.
So I think what would have been helpful would have been to have had some updated responses. Teresa, thank you.
I was just going to say that there is a key controls audit in Q4, so I would expect the auditors to pick up the recs as well. And I think
Okay.
these items are likely to be in the scope of work.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping as part of that work, and when that's reported to you, you'll see hopefully that these are all done and there's no more issues. So
Okay. Thank you.
you should be able
Yeah.
to see that hopefully.
Okay. Thank you. It's useful.
I just thought we'll be able to, subsequent to the meeting, get revised due dates, because I think Andrew say, I think it'd be a glaring omission of us if we didn't sort of chase that one down, if we got urgent priorities in there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so that's, but I think, Officer Stanley said February. So, do you want to just provide that in writing, like, to keep that squared away? Thank you. Anything else in that report? No. So again, thank you for that, for your first visit to us. And we'll move on. You're welcome to stay or go. Thank you. All right. So, so in terms of the main part of that report, were we to, it doesn't say whether we're to, just to note it, I guess. We've obviously made that recommendation in there. Okay. So, civil contingencies update. People must have been very busy recently, I guess, with all that's been going on with floods and seas and all that's there. So thank you for giving up your time and coming here today. Yeah, did you want to introduce the report?
Yeah,
Thank you.
my name is Alison Sayer. I'm the Resilience Manager at North Norfolk District Council. And this is the annual report for the Civil Contingencies team. This is not for any recommendations other than I would very much like to ask that the work of the flood wardens teams is formally acknowledged, because they're doing an absolutely fantastic job for us as a bunch of unpaid volunteers. So rather than go through the report line for line, there's a couple of things I'd like to pull out of that. One is that we work very closely with the Norfolk Resilience Forum, and a lot of my work is external facing, and it is incredibly important that we keep up and maintain the relationships with the partner agencies when things are quiet, because we rely on them for times like now. So there's a great deal of work that the Norfolk Resilience Forum has been doing. And I did mention in the report that there's been some catch-up stuff on there, specifically in terms of risk assessments. And there's been some changes to the National Risk Assessment structure, which was the National Risk Register was published in August of 2023. There is now an assumption of transparency within there, unless it is something to do with the national secret. And they have changed the assessment methodology and added in about 33 new risks to that. This has meant obviously an additional amount of work that needs to be done through the risk management process through the Norfolk Resilience Forum, on top of all the stuff that we were doing catching up past to do with COVID. So there's been a great deal of external facing work to do with that. The Norfolk Resilience Forum, we pay into that. We have a council's contribution for that. That has stayed the same for the past 10 years. Just want to flag up to you that that will be going up inevitably next year. There has been some funding which has come through. That's now coming to an end. They need to look at how they're going to continue to be able to sustain that going forward. But for reasons I'm not party to, the executive board meeting has been postponed until February. I was hoping that we would know what that figure is, but we don't at the moment. We have revised the mutual aid agreement, and this was partly to do with changes with the British Red Cross, who used to provide backstop for us when we needed to open rest centres and so on and so forth. changes to the way that they are structured means that they're no longer offering that as a service that we can sort of pay into. And so our solution to that as a group of local authorities was to double down on our mutual aid agreement. So we would normally partner with Broadland District Council, but this mutual aid agreement means essentially that all the local authorities can come together and can help one another when they need to. And we have a range of formal and informal notification processes that help us to do that. Obviously, the big thing for us has been severe weather and flooding. I literally don't think I've stopped doing anything apart from flooding since the 2nd of October. And I know that because I had to go out and buy myself a new set of wellies and some fleece liners, which were very kindly gifted to me by one of the environmental health team when I was caught short. I needed to go out. There's a great deal of work going on at the moment in and around Potter Heigham. And certainly I made reference to the flood wardens earlier. The flood wardens at Potter Heigham have essentially been managing the flood boards there, which are part of the defences that we slot into place between Herbert Woods Boatyard and Latham's car park. And we're currently in the middle of yet another flood alert, which has been updated yet again today. They have been doing a sterling job at managing that and trying to make it possible for a minimum amount of disruption for all of the businesses involved. It hasn't been possible for us to do that all the time, because when I speak with the flood warning duty officer at the Environment Agency and they say, no, we're concerned there may be something coming along, obviously the defences have to stay in place.
Sure.
But on a day like today, when I've been able to check it myself last night, and we checked it again this morning, we've been able to remove those boards to allow deliveries and waste contractors and so on and so forth. And we will continue to do that as much as we can. But all of the flood wardens around the coast and on the rivers do this unpaid day in, day out. And certainly when it comes to Potter Heigham, they've literally been standing around in a car park for hours, very gently allowing the water to drain away. And I would very much ask that is formally acknowledged, and I will be looking at my own budgets and see if there is something that we can do to thank them, because these are unpaid volunteers and they're working for hours in the cold. I've done it myself for sort of 10 hours to stretch. But these guys are doing it day in, day out for weeks on end as unpaid volunteers. And frankly, I think that's astonishing. And we are extraordinarily lucky that we have people who are so community minded that they're prepared to give up their time and do that. Lastly, there's the Safety Advisory Group. This is an addition which is outside of the normal sort of civil contingencies resilience world. We did have a record year in 2022. And there has been yet another record year. We've had another small increase on that. That is putting some strain on the system and the way that we had a bit of a shock earlier in this year when the events planning team at Norfolk Constabulary went as a part of a cost-cutting exercise, but that has given us the opportunity to review how we do things, and we are now looking at some cross-border county way of looking at those things which are affecting more than one district. So when we have marathons or when we have cycling events that go all the way around Norfolk, we are looking at how we can do that. We've been looking at how to streamline that and to reduce the administrative burden and to triage it. But it's always a balance between making sure that events are safe and enjoyable for the people who are taking part in them, but are as disruptive or as minimally disruptive for those people who aren't. So we don't want traffic and nonsense there. So there is some work which is ongoing in terms of the Safety Advisory Group to try and streamline that. And we are hopeful that there will be some meetings, and we're looking forward to next year being the first year of the sort of combined more county approach. This is not a takeover by the county council, it's the district councils getting together and some county oversight where it is warranted. If anybody has any questions, I'd be pleased to take them now.
Okay, thank you for that introduction. So firstly, the flood wardens, let's I don't know the formal process for that. I'm happy to propose that we officially acknowledge the work that they've done, and happy to do that. Is that a proper way of doing that? Yeah, and if I could have a seconder, and if we're all in agreement, which I think we are, I mean, that would be, so our thanks to them. But I'd also like to add thanks to you, because I'm aware of the work that you do in pulling all these strings together. And actually, without the right people creating the right atmosphere to get the wardens who are volunteers doing their stuff, it wouldn't happen. So thank you to you as well for the work that you've done. And I appreciate that. So I would have one question, which you probably can't answer, but it's, if the cost is going to go up, do we have any indication of what that's likely to be? It's just that we need to enable finance people to start considering that at the earliest opportunity.
I have asked the question, and the answer is that we do not currently have an idea on that. The NRF Executive Board does include our own Chief Executive, so
Yeah.
he will be hopefully aware of what the potential proposals for different funding systems might be very shortly, but I have not had sight of those. I have asked for them, but unfortunately I don't have any hard figures at the moment. No.
That's fine. I didn't expect you to, but I think you'd expect me to ask the question probably. But thank you. Did anybody else have any more questions for Officer Sayer?
Yeah, and I'd like
Go
to
ahead, yeah.
reiterate my thanks as well. I'm assuming you're hard pressed this year because this must be one of the wettest autumns I can remember. I mean, I in the blessedly sort of western side of the district, which has obviously less problems, but even there the ground is absolutely saturated. Is that the case then? And is it sort of a bad year? And next year would things be potentially better if we go back to a more normal autumn?
In terms of what the sort of the Met Office figures, Met Office does a long range forecast for what they think, and we get stats back on how wet or how dry things have been. I'm not going to comment on that because I can't pluck those out of my head. What I can tell you is that I have lost count of the numbers of people telling me that this is the worst they've ever seen it. I would note from my own experience, bearing in mind that I was brought up on the Broads rivers and lived by the rivers for goodness knows how many years. I've been floating myself in 3 separate locations near rivers, and I no longer live near one. I can tell you that it is slightly wetter. We have had an exceptional season in terms of having Storm Babette and then Storm Kieran so close together, with a bunch of neap tides that meant that there's been a less of a tidal reach, so it's been impossible for the Broads to drain out as quickly, compounded by a bunch of tidal locking and spring tides that push more water into the system, and then additional rain on top. It is exceptional. However, it is also a clear trend over the past few years. I believe it is unequivocally part of climate change. We are seeing more incidents more often, lasting longer. Anyone on the Broads will tell you that, which is why we have the Norfolk Strategic Flooding Alliance and why we have the Broadland Futures Initiative that are trying to look at longer term strategically how we reduce the impacts on all of our communities. It is an enormous challenge in our part of the world, because when we are essentially bidding for funds and resources against the rest of the UK, because DEFRA and the Environment Agency are UK-wide organisations, it is very difficult for us to make an economic case that they should spend the money in Norfolk or North Norfolk, rather than areas that have more heavy industry, more population. With the best will in the world, I'm not entirely sure that people are going to be that concerned about saving marshes or how many people come on a Broads holiday on the river. That is the harsh reality of it. For which reason I think we need to be quite clever about where we spend our funding and where we go for wins. And we are involved with the Norfolk Strategic Flooding Alliance at various different levels, strategic, tactical and operational. And we will continue to do that to get our voice heard for our communities. But it is going to be a challenge going forward. And yes, it is very wet.
And to note that you've even found time to do training and exercises, incredible. So unless anybody else has got anything else, it just remains to say a thank you again. It's a very tough task. We're about to talk coastal, which has got the same issues. Where do we get funding? What's the future? What decisions have to be made? And we appreciate the work that you're doing in facing up to those decisions and advising people properly. So again, thank you to you and to the flood wardens who have been working so hard recently.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I'm going to listen around to Rob.
Okay, no, you're welcome. You're welcome to stay. Okay. So again, is that just a note, I believe? Yeah, it's a briefing only, so that's fine. Thank you. So post-wise, review the risks. Welcome, obviously good live. So yeah, we've got some interesting stuff here with all the stuff that's going on. But so today, let's just to request that Governance Risk and Audit Committee reviews the risk presented by the Coastwise project in respect of the likelihood and impact elements of the risk scores pre and post the mitigation actions, so that there is clarity about how these actions will work and thus provide greater reassurance that they can be managed effectively and who owns them. So that's the request for them coming to us, which I'm sure you're aware of. And thank you for, I noticed in your report that you've extracted out the important ones and put those at the bottom. That was very helpful. Thank you. So I don't know if you wish to introduce it, if you have anything that you would like to say to lead us off. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just make a quick introduction. So my name's Rob Goodliff. I'm the Coastal Transition Manager. I'm here at North Norfolk District Council, and I'm the operational lead for the Coastwise project. Now, Coastwise is one of a small number of nationally funded Coastal Transition Accelerator Programme projects, which are looking to work with communities at high coastal erosion risk to prepare transition plans and practical actions to prepare for the future. The idea is it's from the learning from the project here in North Norfolk and the other small number of projects will help shape future sort of government approaches around coastal transition. So where erosion is happening and will happen, and where it will have an impact. So we are all better prepared. So earlier this year, we had the full £15 million, or approximately £15 million confirmed by the Environment Agency, and we've gone through setting up the governance as required for an NNDC programme of projects, and part of that is around developing a risk register. So this risk register was originally developed for what's called an outline business case, which is what we present to the Environment Agency to seek the approval of the funding. That is then reviewed by their large project review group, who made had a few minor questions and one addition to the risk register. It then went back to the Coastwise Governance Board, which again is part of the NNDC project management governance structure. The programme completed a risk workshop to look at the risks that had been identified in the outline business case. One of the things we did is we updated the scoring. We were using an alternative scoring mechanism which didn't meet the NNDC requirements, so we updated the scoring on that and tried to consolidate and add in additional risks where they've been identified for Coastwise. So within the papers provided, the final page provides you with the risk matrix to help make sense of the numbering. And then the top 5 risks have been identified on the bottom, so brought together, and that's following mitigation. So in brief, the top 5 are changes in government direction, meeting the proposed financial projections, which are in the outline business case, land availability for coastal transition, the consenting timeframes needed to deliver practical actions for transition, and nutrient neutrality, because some of the actions expected to involve moving residential properties and potentially increasing the numbers of residential properties. Some of the risks which have been identified and then sort of the score mitigated down is around negative public relations, and communities and sectors are not interested or don't support or are willing to engage in Coastwise. Active resistance to coastal transition. Many communities in England and elsewhere seeking coastal risk management structures, so coastal defences. Unfortunately, in North Norfolk, this isn't possible in many locations. And the final one, which is mitigated down, is around planning decisions, which is obviously an independent process, preventing some of the actions being delivered. Okay, happy to take questions or any suggestions. Thank you.
Is there anybody, did you have anything for us there? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, thank you very much for that. That's appreciated. I believe it was called into this committee because I think when it came to, I think it was full council, all we had
It was
that
Toby and
page,
Scruton.
that page, which was fairly sparse. And now you've given us more detailed on the risk register. If I could make a suggestion on the register itself, which I think overall the format is okay, but where you look at the risk description, you don't describe in any of those the impact of that risk. So if I read through, I know I'll just take the first one, large major project program decisions being delayed by members, cabinet or processes. Well, the answer to that is so what? You can go through each one of those and you say, so what? So when I did it, normally you say there is a risk that something would happen, which would mean that. If you do that, I mean, so you've got, it's really it's two sides of the sentence and you only got one side of the sentence down there. And I think if you had that, that would help the reader understand and quantify what the risk actually is. And then I suppose it's same look at the mitigation actions, but what is actually being done. So that's just my suggestion, if I may.
Okay. Anything else? No? Any comments on any of the particular items at all? No. Okay. So, unless, did you have anything at all, Jill? No? Did you have any questions at all? No? Okay. Yep.
Hang on, I do take Christopher's point about the, you know, the consequences of that. I think it's very detailed, and you know, there's an awful lot to think about here. I mean, obviously, being able to E2 being unable to spend allocated funds in the projected years, that's something that's been flagged, and I can imagine that there could be circumstances that would make that difficult, but obviously that's something we really need to be on top of.
Obviously, it's a living document, so as those things go on, it will change. So, I think, you know, again, accept Christopher's point that it helps us know what does it really matter or not, that it's a risk, but you know, how, you know, a bit like we were saying earlier about, you know, quantify it, how much of a risk is it really? You know, the fact that you'll run out of blue ink in your pen is a risk, but does it matter if you're going to use a black, you know? So yeah. So, but actually I think the ones that you've highlighted and pulled out are real risks, considering, you know, national priorities. We all know there's a general election coming. These things can change, and that is a risk, and a real, and not just perceived, that, you know, that happens. So I think it's important that the risks that you've pulled out, I didn't see any others that I felt needed pulling out any further. The one on unable to spend allocated funds in projected years, is that that's potentially a risk that we lose funding if we've not done it. What's likely to cause that unspending of it? Have we not got the skilled contractors, or
no? So it's a bit of a story behind this one. Okay, so when we were developing the project, we were reassured that we won't be held to our projections of our allocated spend over the years of the programme. As we went through, we'd had some draft figures in, then we were told, oh no, we used those to talk to Treasury and things, they're kind of fixed now. And we were a bit like, oh, well, you know, we would perhaps have done it slightly differently. What we have done is we've highlighted this as a risk, and so has East Riding of Yorkshire Council, who are our other sort of main CTAP, as a significant risk. We both see this as a risk. We also included within the outline business case something we've called a financial contingency approach, which hasn't been done before, using flood and coastal erosion risk grant in aid funding, where essentially we're saying, you know, the potential for unallocated funds and contingency funds which aren't spent within a year, whether we can actually claim those down and actually put those into a coastal transition fund, which we manage and can generate interest on to reinvest in coastal transition, and then have ways of then utilising that spend for the things outlined within our programme. Now, this does several things. One is it de-risks the program from a financial perspective for ourselves, meaning we can concentrate on delivery rather than worrying about, trying to move money and spending money. We can use it effectively and efficiently rather than thinking, well, we've got to spend this money else we might lose it. De-risks from the Environment Agency so that they're not chasing us all the time on this. But it also gives us the opportunity to explore an area which is a key work package for coastal transition, which is future transition funding, so innovative funding. We've got a shared post with the East Riding in the National Environment Agency team, which is going to explore this whole area. But ultimately, one part of that is around developing a transition fund with alternative funding mechanisms sort of feeding into it, and then some sort of management potentially of that fund with ways of, if you like, tapping off the funding for specific activities into the future. Now, it's the management of that fund is a really interesting idea, and this contingency approach enables us to investigate that. Now, we're in discussions with the agency around the mechanics of this, what they will accept and what they won't, and just start a discussion with Tina through the finance team as well from an NNDC perspective.
Okay.
But that's another way we're looking to try and manage that risk, because what we don't want to happen is to not be able to spend the funding and then us losing it and North Norfolk losing the opportunity, and we're also losing that opportunity for learning for the nation as well. So it's kind of critical.
Yeah, I think what's important about this on coastal transition, there's just the two of you working on it. It's a whole new thing, and we've got to find whole new ways of working and delivering it. So yeah, thank you for sharing that with us, that there's this different thinking going on, because it's going to need to be. So if I just take again, just so we work the particularly higher risk ones, land required to deliver the scheme is not available. I assume that is fallback land that we would need to purchase, not the land that's going to naturally be lost anyhow.
Yeah, it's for moving things onto, if that's how we move forward, which is quite likely.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, not necessarily a risk, I suppose. The risk is still there, but the curiosity is that likely to increase land prices when people know the plan?
I think that's where
we can do about that.
I think that's where we need to look at various opportunities, and there's always an element of negotiation.
Sure.
As with any land, if there's a hope value, there's an increase in value, and it's only right that should be sort of taken into account as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. I think I'll just have a quick look. I don't think I had any further questions. If you just bear with me, because I'll make sure that we've got all the stuff. No, I think I've got everything there. So unless has anybody else got any further questions? No, still happy. So in terms of the answer, because it was requested from overview and scrutiny, we need to send them an answer, I believe, and that would, are we happy to say reviews the risks that we have reviewed the risks presented by the Coastwise project in respect of the elements that they mention. There is clarity about those actions will work, and we've asked for a little bit to be added to that. Thank you. And how those actions work to provide greater reassurance that they are being managed effectively and who owns them, so that there is clarity about how those actions will work and thus provide greater reassurance that they are being managed effectively. Well, I think that what you've presented here to us gives us the assurance that you're managing it and looking at the risks. So I think we can say that the register is delivering that. Yeah, and obviously we know we've got a good team there. And also another question that I don't know if is on here, it's also part of the stuff I want to discuss later. Key players. Is there a risk around key players? You know, you've obviously got some specialists involved with this. Is there a risk around key players that we should be aware of, or are you structured such that there's someone, you know, bucket of water, if you weren't there tomorrow, someone can step in? So yeah.
Yeah, there's sort of team resilience, isn't there?
Yeah.
So we are developing a team at the moment. It's sort of with various different sort of areas of expertise. We do have a sort of project structure and recording of documentation, etc. as we're moving forwards, and we have regular updates, and we keep sort of essentially it's a bi-weekly update of where we are on the project all the time. So it's quite easy for anybody to pick it up and look back at what's been going on, you know, and you can look forward to what's happening next. Skills and recruitment was identified as a risk. We've now recruited most of the team with sort of the team coming on board. There's one role we haven't been able to recruit to. It's an area which around sort of town and country planning, which nationally it's very difficult to recruit to that as well. Which is so we're looking at alternative mechanisms to provide that support. So yeah, I think there's various people, coastal transition, coastal erosion, it's quite a busy space at the moment. There's a lot of research and development going on. There's a lot of interest in areas, interesting areas like coastal heritage. And you know, the more we talk to people, the amount of people who are interested in graveyards actually in erosion zones is quite significant as well. So there'll be areas where there are very niche areas of expertise, but that's partly what Coastwise is about, is to explore these areas and our understanding and the ways forward that we might need to take forward to try and manage these the impacts really around those areas. So good question. Hopefully we've got it covered, but we'll have to wait and see.
Is that is it in there in the risks?
Yeah, so
I think I read it
resourcing
somewhere.
is, I think access to consultants, the appropriate consultants is as well. We're also quite interested in broadening our horizons. Often we end up with, you know, quite rightly, you know, similar consultants. There's a few larger consultancy firms which often do work on the coast, which regularly crop up.
Right.
But actually in the transition area, there's an opportunity to find new people to work with as well, which actually sort of perhaps de-risks that slightly by being able to do that.
Yeah, well, that was something I was going to say is we're obviously as a committee looking at independent persons. I'm not suggesting independent persons, but you know, working with local historical groups or whatever are a source of really good local information of where those things may be. So, but that's just a thought for you to consider.
Thank you.
Suggesting that's all. Thank you. Okay. So presumably, I think we can find some words for that to put in and to feedback to overview and scrutiny. So if everybody's happy that we've put some words around that we're contented with what we're seeing, we've reviewed it, and that we're happy that they're doing the right stuff. Is that agreed? With the addition,
If we could just add in my point
with the
about
addition of what Chris was said, yeah.
put in the consequences of each risk.
Yeah.
there, please.
Yeah, no, happy. Thank you. Okay, good. Well, thank you for taking the time to come along. And did you want something to? Yeah, go on.
Would you like the risk officer to consider putting the CTAP project on the list of corporate projects that are in the corporate risk register?
Because you've got some in there already, haven't you? Because we've got the corporate risk register coming up.
Yes, but the CTAP itself, an overall risk for that is not in the corporate.
Oh,
risk
as an
register at
overall
present.
risk.
So if you want the risk officer to, yes,
Yes,
an overall
and
risk.
then I think
So
we should. I
consider
think
that.
it's in the corporate risk register because I noticed it was in there. There's some information in there, I'm sure. I apologise if I've got that wrong, but not not as an overall. I don't think. I think I saw something in the report we've got coming up. Corporate risk register.
Just wondering if, because coastal erosion, impacts of coastal erosion is perhaps the corporate risk, and Coastwise might be part of the mitigation for managing that corporate risk is another way to look at it.
It should be in the corporate risk because of
As a project, as a program, the risk of not delivering that successfully is what would be on the register.
Yeah.
Not the overall risk, yes, of flooding and damage to the coast is already in there. This would be in as a managed project with the risks associated with delivering the project. But that's something that Rob and Mrs. Stankley could have a discussion about as to whether it should be.
I think to save this question coming up again, if it's put in here where we can review it as it goes along, so that as it changes, we can see those changes. Would that be, yeah, okay, thank you. So we need to put that as a recommendation then, that's considered, that it's included in the risk, in the corporate risk register. Thank you. So I'll propose Jill this time. I don't know who you got last time. Thank you. Okay, so I think we're all done with that one. So again, thank you. Thank you for the work you're doing. It's challenging work and difficult messages to deliver to the public, but thank you for coming in today and sharing it with us. Thank you. Right. And moving on, where am I now? Customised procurement exemptions register. I think we're getting that up on the screen. Is that correct? So we've only got the one there.
If I may just
Yes,
explain, every GRAC meeting, I'm required to inform the committee of the exemptions to our usual procurement rules that are granted. The previous period, there was one exemption, and in the current period, there's one exemption. So the next period will follow on from the 14th of November. And the information is before you on the screen to policy and practice with an amount of £23,426 for the supply of a poverty dashboard. And the reason was under exemption G for the supply of goods or services where there's only one supplier and no acceptable alternative. So I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
I think that's a fairly specialised area, and it's probably money well spent because it's more predicting about where there might be issues and us intervening before there are issues. So I think that's, I'm quite happy with that. That's gone through the right process. So yeah, thank you. So we'll just note that again, I think. Right, the corporate risk register. Where's that looking? Here we go. So corporate risk register. Are you introducing that today? So Officer Stankley will introduce that for us. Thank you. And then there's obviously quite a bit in here, but hopefully most of it's.
Yeah, the corporate risk register has been updated. Each of the corporate risks have been considered in term. Some of them have changed slightly, but several have remained the same. A comment has been added where there has been a change. And I think probably for the council at the moment, the financial sustainability is probably one of the highest risks that we've got at the moment. I don't think there's really anything else that I need to add. If there are any questions, though, I'd be more than happy to take them.
Thank you. So, Gustav, you that one.
If I'm going to start with
Yeah.
something actually not specific on that, but something I've said on many occasions under your predecessor, so I'll say it here under this new administration. I think this is a truly dreadful format for a risk register. It really is. It's nearly 50 pages long. If you actually read through it, there's actually not a huge amount of text in there. It comes back to the point I made with the previous item. In terms of, if you look at the risks, it's not very clear from any of these what the impact of those risks would be if they actually materialized. And if you look at the mitigating actions, they're just often a list of points, not actually, you don't get a feel from those what actual action is generally being taken against them. You can't see how they're scored. You've just got the total score. So when you look at a risk, its likelihood and impact. Well, if you look at the previous civil contingency ones, you've got some of those which have actually a very low likelihood, but a huge impact. And sometimes it's interesting to see those split out. And I'm just wondering why it is, if we look at the civil contingencies, that we can have a risk register that looks like that, but we can't have it, which is a very easy way of doing it, and to read it, that we can't have one when it comes to the corporate risk log. And I just honestly get the feeling this is just a tick box exercise every time it comes here. We pick a few bits and pieces out of it and ask the odd question, but nothing more than that. And I don't really know what value we're really adding to it, looking at the format, because you can't easily drill down to any of the detail in them.
Okay, did you want to respond or?
Yeah,
a few comments to make
um,
around it?
Yeah, we are actually in the process of, or at the initial stages of producing a different risk register, and my view is that it would be more like along the lines of the civil contingencies one, in that it would be, my only comment on the civil contingencies one is that I think I produced it landscape rather than portrait, so it was a bit bigger to read. But other than that, I think it is what members would need. I think it is easily understood. And for me, I think it gives, there's place in there for comment, and that is something that I would like our risk register to move towards, and that will be what I will be developing in the next quarter or so. We've recently done a tendering exercise for in-phase and decided not to replace it with a system, but to develop something in-house, which will be more along the lines of what you're saying you would prefer for the risk register.
Please, yeah.
No, when I started in GRAC 4.5 years ago, this is that's risk register we used to have, which is a standard project format register. Whichever you go, that's what it looks like. As you rightly say, it's better landscape as opposed to portrait, because then you can just easily read it across the thing. But it would be a fraction of the size. It wouldn't be 50-odd pages. It would probably be 10 or so at most, I suspect, if we did it on that basis. And we could really then drill down to the detail, which is, I just find quite impossible. But we've got lots of fancy little graphs on there, which I don't really think add anything to anything either. So sorry, I'm in a real rant mode about it, but I have ranted many times in the past about it. But it would be really good to see something change at long last, and that would help us to do what we meant to do. So I'd almost like to go as far as saying, as a committee, I would personally like to see, if we could have a recommendation, that's what we would like to see going forward, developed on that.
Okay, can I ask Thomas, in terms of, because you deliver a lot of these reports for us, so how does that work for you? And on top of that, I'm going to throw the question in, what risk is there to us of an organisation of changing it for people that already understand it and work with it? Is that going to, making that change, going to introduce risks of its own that people suddenly don't understand it?
Well, there's two key elements here. One is the changing of the way the corporate risk register is presented. That's a key part of the changes that we'll be going through when we review the whole risk management framework, which is wider than just looking at what the register looks like. There's also then the information that you need to store that information so you can look at trends and see what's been happening. Then there's a question of presentation. You can present it any way you like. The previous layout that we had, there were some problems with that, in that some comments were in there for 2 years and never changed. And we had no idea whether those comments were new or whether they were 2 years old. So that was part of the reason for moving towards a system that stores the whole history of what's going on and being able to see only the most up-to-date comments.
Yeah.
But yes, that can be done. I do think there is a bit of a conflict in having something that displays on just a few pages and then actually being able to drill down to the detail that's not actually there in that report. So that's something we're going to have to work on to see how we can meet both those challenges of having a short report that shows you the key things you need to see, but also having the detail about the things that are really important that you need to be considering. So that's the circle we need to square, if you like, when we look at this and how we're going to present it in future.
Yeah, because I think it's I'm all for using technology. So you give me headline and I can just click on it and go deeper. Maybe we need to, for those that use paper, find a way that we can put it up on the screens. So if they want more information in the meeting, it can be clicked on and presented. So yeah, I'm for a report that gives me enough that whether I want to question it or not, and then further information behind, but doesn't work in paper. So do we have, and I don't want to, I know we're getting to a busy part of the year in terms of all the financials, and as we spoke earlier about the amount of reports that will be done, when would we hope to get this review of the corporate risk register done and its new presentation? Are we talking 6 months? Would that be for you? I suspect, you know, a year? I just want us to get a feel for it. It'll keep it'll keep members happy knowing that we're moving in the right direction, I think. So.
Well, ideally, it would, I think in view of the time of year that we're at, I think ideally it would be good if we could have something that is usable by the beginning of the new financial year. I don't see that it is a major task in terms of presenting it in the way that it has been done for the civil contingencies paper, and I must admit I do struggle to see why we would need anything more complex than that. In terms of trends, I don't know whether that's all that useful, because it's the risk that we're looking at today rather than a risk that has gone by. And for me, that is simple, straightforward. It is concise. It is something that members can read and take on board, and then come back with any supplementary questions. And for me, that is the way that I would like to move in terms of presenting the information. So I think that we could have something in place on the risk register for the new financial year. So we're looking at 3 months.
Yeah, I'd have liked to have seen that, but I didn't want to, given none of the constraints that everybody has, I didn't want to suggest that. So, but does that for you, Christopher, so that we start a new year with it?
Some comments on what Helen has said. I mean, one of the things about several things in terms of running habit on a sort of a more spreadsheet basis. So we don't know when it was updated. Well, one of the things you normally have on that would be a last updated column, so then you can see how fresh the information is on there.
Yeah.
That's so that would address that. The other point I'd make is one of the things I was always taught to MI reports is that the information should leap off the page in front of you. A lot of us don't all have time to sit down there and squirrel into databases to find information. I don't think that's what our role actually here is. I think our role is to come here whenever we look at the reports and see the highlighted things and add value to challenging that. That's what we're here to do.
Yeah.
In a constructive manner. And if the information, the reports aren't giving us that, then you know what's the point? You know, that's
Yeah.
the point I'm
No,
making.
I agree with what you're saying there. It should have that information there that might raise some questions, and you might, and so I'm not saying the information shouldn't be there, that you need to drill down to get it. There should be further information should you want it. So for example, I think trends, in a way, it's all very well known it's a risk here today, but has that risk gone up or down? I think is kind of helpful, because you need to know you're moving in the right direction. It doesn't need to be on the front page, information like that. So information needs to be available, but not necessarily on the front page. So if you think, oh, this is a risk, how, you know, what do I need to know about it? Because I'd really like to know more, then you should be able to get more, but we don't need it on the front page. So, okay, so is this a process that you already have in train, or do we need to give you a recommendation to do that?
We haven't, well, I've got ideas. We haven't had a meeting yet as to how we'll move this forward. Because we're not going to be using in phase moving forwards. So we'll need to set up some working groups, but it is something that we are doing, definitely. So I don't think it necessarily needs a recommendation. Yeah.
And in terms of functionality with the internal auditors as well, presumably that's, can I ask you, I mean, as you're still here, is that an issue?
I mean, I'm happy to help if you need some help or advice on it.
Yeah.
Because I think for audit committee, we do need that bit of narrative at the front of the report that points out to us this has gone up and why, or that's gone down, or that hasn't moved, or new ones, old ones, that sort of movement in a summary way. But I mean, I can help you with format, so we can arrange some things, no problems.
And would it would we get a chance to briefly sort of review it, you know, either through us or over in scrutiny when that's decided where these things fit? That's part of a different conversation, to see that it's meeting different members' requirements as well. I would, as much as I'd love for that to come through.
Presumably it does
GRAC.
come back here though.
Yeah, it needs to
next
come back
time.
here. I would love to see it seen by a wider audience. You Yeah, so I don't know, maybe we should review it and then send it through to Owen. I don't know, I'm searching for an answer to that, but I think we need more than the few of us to decide that. Because it's for members and officers to use, so.
Yes,
Yeah.
I mean, as part of the project of looking at it's the risk register, it is the outstanding audit recommendations, and it is performance management that we're looking at. That we won't be developing it in isolation, that there will be I say a project group, I think, for each element of it. And we can incorporate some workshops or look at, you know, how we consult with members of both this committee and ONS, and then more widely as well as part of the process, because obviously the next meeting won't be until we should nearly had it completed.
Yeah.
So we'll need to consult before then, and we can do that. Yeah, we'll work out something.
Even some of that can go as
Research.
email for
Mm.
people to give comments on. I just think it needs a wider audience to make sure that we're getting a general consensus, really. I think.
Yeah.
So that's-
And I've spoken with Teresa, or we haven't spoken, emailed, haven't we, about using, you know, you already captured the information in terms of the outstanding audit recommendations, is that we'll use that and allow access.
Yeah, there's a system that the contractor uses, which I can set Tina up on so that they can put their input in straight away, and then they can change it to implement it, and then the contractor goes in and reviews the evidence and they shut it off. So that might help you to have
Yeah.
access to it, so you can do some of that work
Okay.
yourself up front.
All right, thank you. Well, we've done that, I think, so thank you. We'll wait to see that come forward. So in terms of any detail, did you have any detail? Shall I go with one? Yeah, thank you. So can I look at CR024, which on my page is 108, but it's the people resources. It shows the likelihood and the consequences as quite low. It says failure to retain or recruit adequately trained and experienced staff. Given the conversations we have around people for finance, we've heard about Coastwise. We know about planners, because it's town and country planners they're looking for. I can only raise the question, are we sure this is in the right space? And that is the proper representation of the risk, given that we know, you know, staffing issues can be a problem for some of the projects we've got going, especially as, you know, we've now got Fakenham coming along with those projects to run as well. So I don't know if anybody can, I can only, again, suggest it. It's all we can do as a committee, where anybody wants to pick up on that and to review that. Are you still looking for it? So, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I know that I felt that it was perhaps didn't reflect the position that I feel that we're in terms of there being quite a high risk, and this is shown as a low risk. For me, it's not one that I've updated, so I don't know whether it's been interpreted slightly differently from a different by a different officer. But for me, it would sit more comfortably for me as a higher risk. Yeah.
So I guess from our point of view, all we can do is recommend that you consider reviewing that risk. Would that be appropriate? Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. So and again, propose a seconder. Yeah, I'll propose a second. We'll take whichever names you wish. We'll all have our hands up. So thank you. And oh yeah, so see if I can find that one. Unless did anybody else have anything while I'm looking for it? No, did you have any particular ones, Christopher? You've got yours handy, if not. Okay. Difficult to find on here. They don't list them. SRs, but not CRs. Yeah. Yeah. What was the subject? Yeah.
joint venture scheme. Because one of the key things for nutrient neutrality, now that there's no government legislation to mitigate that, is the joint venture scheme that we have with some other authorities in Norfolk. And what risks do we have around that actually working, or what was our view about how likely is that joint venture is going to work?
Okay. Was that, did you get enough information? Yeah, thank you.
Yes, I've not had any direct involvement in this, but I'll have to take it away and speak to officers in planning. I'm not sure, to be honest with you, where we are with it in terms of whether there's been any further progress on setting it up. That's not something I can really answer yet,
Yeah.
but I can come back to you on that.
No, that's
yeah.
right. I wouldn't expect you, because
Mm,
obviously it's a
yeah.
different portfolio area. So to be fair, I wouldn't expect you to know the detail. I have had conversations which give me cause for concern, put it that way, with others.
Okay. So what you want to know is what's our exposure, our risk to being in that partnership for the mitigation?
My concern is that is actually the only plank we seem to have at the moment in order to mitigate nutrient neutrality. Now there's going to be
is the risk of it
rescue
not
from the
delivered?
government side with legislation.
Yeah.
What likelihood is it that joint venture scheme will actually fly? That's my concern.
Okay. Did you have that? Was that? Thank you.
I don't see that in the risk. I didn't see that in the risk anywhere, and I thought that's something that's really
Okay.
pertinent to that.
So we need to just suggest that we consider the nutrient neutrality mitigation and the risks around it. That would be our suggestion. Proposal second again. I'll let you two have it this time. And okay, so I'm now on electronic version, page 125, CR034, not achieving the net zero 2030 target. Given that the administration's plan is to have, net zero was from the previous administration, to have that as a key objective through all the plans, it's concerning to see that it's considered a high risk that it's not going to be delivered, even though it's a mainstream.
That's just on page 121, I think, on the
121 on the
electronic
paper one.
version.
Thank
If
you.
no one's found it.
Yeah, I found it on 125 on my electronic. Yeah. Yeah, and so it says about the likelihood and the risk. Presumably, if we've got that driven as a key theme within the council, the likelihood should be reduced, although it's a risk. So again, I'm suggesting that well, either we've got a reason as to why it sits there, in that we don't feel that we've got it, because by comparison, if we took a look at some of those that were right at the end to do with our governance stuff, we've got governance procedures, people follow those procedures and they're a low risk. If we've got something that should be as a thread throughout the organisation, it's still a high risk we're not delivering it, that again to me didn't make sense. Now there may be good reason for it, I accept that it's been placed there. So I don't know if there's any offerings at the moment as to why it may sit there, and if not as well, we can still recommend that it's considered whether we need to take actions. What do we need to do to get that risk down is basically, I guess, what I'm aiming for. Thank you.
My view would be that it is a significant risk, purely, I think, because of the size of what we've got to achieve in the time scale in which we've got to achieve it, and that there does need to be a perhaps a greater shift in culture in the organisation in terms of having it at the forefront of everyone's minds in everything that they're doing. And I don't think we've got there at all yet in terms of getting to that way of thinking. And that's why I think it is such a large risk, and the consequence being that I think there will be a penalty or a significant fine of several £1 million if we do not achieve it, is perhaps why it is the consequence so high. And it is just such a big target to hit, and it's effectively 6 years now, isn't it?
Yeah. So the question of a fine, because I thought this was an internally set 2030. Is this externally driven as well?
My understanding is that it is externally driven, that we should be committed to achieving net zero by 2030. I
Okay.
think it's unless the government changes the
Okay.
timeframe.
So again, there's a risk that we saw there with the change of government that those could be go up or down. So okay. Yeah, I get your answer for why the risk is there. I guess what I'm looking for is how do we tell the organisation they perhaps need to find how to get that risk down, given the fact you said there's potentially fines and things involved. Because this doesn't necessarily tell us what we're doing to reduce that risk. So unless anybody, we've got the monitoring of it through the NZAC and things, but it doesn't actually ensure net zero considerations at the forefront of council decision making. Additional investment in renewable generation. Is there budgets for that? For renewable generation, or is this something that we're going to have to be bidding in to get? It's all very well having them there as an answer, but for something that's quite considerable risk. I don't know if you know.
My understanding was that there are funds available, but I don't think the schemes that we had got at the time met the criteria for the external funding. We have set up a reserve which we've taken out of the development plan reserve, but it is only 500,000, and I see that we will need to keep topping that up. But it is, again, that is to start to concentrate the mines in terms of there being a budget that we can look at using if schemes are developed, to try and get people thinking about net zero and target.
Okay, so I don't know, we can't recommend to anybody, but I just think that we need to get this thinking through the council, and I don't think we're in any position anyhow to make any recommendation, but just to note that as a committee, if the committee agrees that it's essential to drive that down, that the first step there is that it's at the forefront of all council decision and making. We've obviously set a budget for it, and there's some risks at the end. So, is that all we can do? Is just put it in the minutes? I think there's nothing more that we can. Yeah, just to say that as a committee that we feel that needs to be worked on. So, yeah, thank you. Thank you for your. Was there anything else that anybody had? Okay, good. Well, thank you for that as well. Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Just-
Okay, come back to you.
Just a point of information, the government net zero target is by 2050,
Yeah.
but there are lots of other targets
Okay.
to be achieved before that,
Yeah.
within that overall net zero.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Sorry, John. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, I thought we'd finished on that one.
Oh, you're on the next
I'm
one.
on the
Okay.
next
Sorry.
one.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Thank
I
you.
thought that
Okay.
was what you were.
No. So we've done all we can on that. Yeah, we've reviewed it. No, we haven't. We've done. Reviewed it and note the corporate risk register. So we'll note that that's done with the comments that we've made. Okay. So we're now down to the work programme. So before we get into that, I just wanted to make a comment on the peer review. In there were some comments regarding GRAC and us and division of labour, so to speak. And to say that we've got the new scrutiny officer come in January. I think that we need to have a conversation, perhaps with both committees, certainly with both chairs, to decide where we stop any overlap that's been going on, to review that part of the peer review. So just to mention that, really, because the work programme is obviously based on what we've done historically. But going forward, there's a potential risk that will change as we decide these dividing lines. And I also think we need to work through with the constitution as well of how that's written for those. So that's not till January when we've got the new scrutiny officer. But I think that was worth noting, that we're aware of the peer review and that there are some actions there. Is that something that as a committee we think is a good way to do that, to decide on the division, and then we can decide on our work programme within that? Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I suppose I'm not clear where they think the overlap is at the moment.
No,
having-
and that's
having
why I think
served-
we
having
need to have
served
the
on-
conversation.
Yeah, having served on both for a number of years now.
Well, we do see things that we chat here about here, and then it goes to review and scrutiny as well. Maybe some of that doesn't need to be done at both. It's a conversation to be had. That's all that's all I'm saying at this time. That conversation will come in January with the new scrutiny officer, so they can pick up on that. And we'll move that forward then, and hopefully you'll be part of that discussion as well. So because it's useful if we sit on both. I think Jill does as well. In fact, most of this committee sits on the other one, doesn't it? So and no, if that can save us duplicating work, then that works for everybody, I think. So thank you. So work programme. Did you have Emma? Did you have anything you wanted to say about the work programme?
I don't think there's anything specific, Chairman. You can see where
Yeah.
I've updated and added comments. We're sort of coming to the end of this municipal year, just one more meeting
Yeah.
in the cycle. I don't know. I mean, I've sort of slotted in the potential dates, obviously, for the statement of accounts, draft statement of accounts. I mean,
Yeah.
may be subject to change. We'll see how that situation plays out. I think the only other thing is sort of at the bottom, I put some policies that are due for review next year, so they will need to be programmed in. So I've just flagged those items up, and we can consider, that they tend to come through, as you can see, at particular dates, so we can just check that they're not overloading the work programme and they work for people involved. But no, otherwise I don't have anything.
Just on those ones that got my name against them, I'm not too sure why they have. The anti-money laundering and the counter fraud.
Obviously, the previous head of internal audit has worked on producing those documents with us. I can share what we've had previously on those if you want to have a look at them, Teresa, and then we can decide.
I don't think they're audit documents to own. I'm happy to help you with them as best I can. I don't know much about anti-money laundering stuff though. But I think there'd be organisational ones to present at the time, but yeah, we can have a chat about those, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'll just do my usual as well. Timeliness of reports. We've spoken about how they're getting squeezed with the 42% and officers, shortage of staff. But hopefully that's coming on now with the new people that you've got. But again, we had some, an update come in late and reports that were dropped from this meeting. We need to try and get that all back on track so that it's spread throughout the year. Otherwise, there's a potential here, like even at the end of the year here, we could end up having to perhaps even pull an extra one, a reserve note to do some of the financial stuff. So I could just encourage people to do all they can to keep up the timeliness of reports to keep it all flowing in as planned. Unless anybody's got anything else on that, are we all content? No. So exclusion of press and public, which I don't believe we've any need to. So that's at what's that, 15:50? We'll close the meeting. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Oh, and I forgot to mention as well, but we were 4, actually, we're 3 in the end.